Welcome, Grace. Let's talk about that psychologist, Ged. So, A Wizard of Earthsea, written by Ursula K in 1968, is going to tell a story of a kid named Dooney who will eventually become Ged. It's going to take place on more of a rural island called Gaunt. And it knows very early on that this kid Dooney has some arcane ability. He uses a name and he attracts all these sheep to him, and they kind of herd around him and they follow him into town. This catches the eye and attracts the attention of his aunt, and they have similar abilities, but she doesn't really know that much about the powers in which she dabbles. She can't cure better than she can curse. And that's a very big problem in this world. Like, sure, you can go mess the world up, but can you fix it? And there's some references, the aunt as being a witch, and we get some phrases like wicked as woman's magic, weak as woman's magic, which is slightly disappointing considering that Le Guin often will undermine standard notions about fantasy. And I guess male magic is more powerful than women's. I don't know. But it's also strange considering the story is about a man who uses his magic wrong the whole story and then has to redeem himself. Magic is very much synonymous with things like scholarship. He begins to learn about lore. He begins to learn about plants. And it's also one thing that I noticed, but it's random, is that wizardry isn't like bad. It's not frowned upon. It's more or less accepted in this world. It's a profession. Soon after all of this, a very pivotal moment occurs, especially for Ged. The Kargs are going to attack his island. Ged, and it seems like most of his island is relatively helpless in the face of this threat. So he just starts conjuring illusions, and he actually tricks the Kargs enough to where they kind of flee out of these illusions of ghosts that they see surrounding the town. And it gives them time to burn their boats, and they manage to survive this attack and repel this assault. So after this, Ged is brought under the tutelage of Guin, and he's conferred the name Ged, so he's no longer Dooney, he's named Ged. And one of the first lessons is that becoming an adult is patience. So not only is magic synonymous with things like scholarship, but it is synonymous with patience, with growing up. And this is going to be a major theme in the whole story. In some sense, the Kargs, these impulsive barbarians who attacked, they're not patient, they're impatient. And they could be treated as not being grown up. They also, as far as I could tell, didn't have magic. But Ged quickly learns to grow bored of Guin's teaching because it is patient. It requires patience. Guin tells Ged, he says, when you know the fourfoil, and that's going to be a plant, in all its seasons, root and leaf and flower, by sight and scent and see, then you may know its true name, knowing its being, which is more than its use. What, after all, is the use of you, or of myself? Is Gaunt Mountain useful, or the open sea? Guin went on half a mile or so and said at last, to hear one must be silent. Knowing is clearly different than using. Using is exploitation. You pick a plant because it has medicinal properties. While that's understandable in some circumstances, that's not knowing the plant. You have to know everything about the plant, everything that it lives in harmony with, which animals feed on it. If you pick that plant, will they suffer? Or will they be affected? Will the whole balance be affected? And is there any way to rectify that balance once it has been destabilized? And it's also important that he emphasizes true names, right? There's going to be this heavy emphasis on true names, because that's how the magic system in this world works. Real magic consists of knowing the name of the thing, and then you can use it. And that's kind of what Guin is saying. That's going to necessarily exploit it. You need to know every name around it and every effect that that's going to cause. Now, this might be a bit of a boring, tedious task. Ged, smart as he is, he recognizes how boring this is. And because he wants to use spells, right? He wants power. Like, for instance, there's a storm that comes, and he wants Guin to send the storm away because, like, why sit here and get wet? Like, why get rained on? Guin doesn't do it, and he's like, come on, why would I become a wizard if I can't do this? Like, this is what I'm going to do all day, just send the storms out to sea. Guin, this isn't even something that he would ever consider. Whereas Ged, in his mind, he can't understand why, if I have this power, would I not use it Ged has learned certain beliefs. He's learned to sort of feed his ego. Ged wants to remain dry. Ogien's belief is that, well, that's sort of your ego in a way. Why haven't you learned to accept being wet as the natural process? Why would you think that your ego has any right to impose on the world some other alternative? Why would you destabilize the balance for your ego? In Taoism, there is this belief of sort of action without intent. So you're just like the rock, maybe, that's falling, where Ged is not. Ged very much upends that kind of physical process. Like, he's just going to send the storm on another direction. But Ogien thinks, well, no, like the storm, you just follow a path. You follow a direction. You become part of the balance. So we do also see that magic has this ability to disrupt. So magic can very much be used to satisfy pride, to satisfy ego. And there's a point where Ged wonders, smart as he is, what's the good of having power if you're too wise to use it? Ged begins to perceive OG as mundane, a little basic. Right? He's just like tending his sheep all the time in this like really isolated rural environment. But for the time being, he remains his protege, and Ogien does begin to instruct him a little more in magic. And then one day, kind of when Ged's out in the grass, he's just chilling, and he encounters a girl. They're hanging out, but immediately she begins to ask certain questions that prick at Ged's pride. He feels like he's being taunted. She's kind of asking him, like, oh, you can do all of this stuff, but can you do this? And Ged's like, well, I can do everything. I can do everything. And, right, like summoning the dead, sure, that's no big deal for me. And this is kind of like his go-to. Like, he always falls back on this one. This one just for him, this is just like the pinnacle, bring back the dead. And in some sense, he's doing this because he wants praise, he wants admiration, but he's not getting it. And he realizes, well, maybe I'll actually have to perform these feats. Even once she learns that he can do it, then she starts twisting it and saying, well, maybe you're a little scared or something. Like, maybe you're not that cool. And I do think she is intending it to be this way, but the world will sometimes play into your sense of what being mocked is. It doesn't mean that you should always act on it. It doesn't mean that you should always go around boasting and proving to those people and putting them all in their place. And he does. He always kind of boasts. We see that, yeah, his magic is juvenile, just like his mindset. Right? He's impatient. He's not an adult yet. After the interactions with this girl, he goes back to the cabin, and there's a book that's open. He starts deciphering the ruins. Sure enough, he summons a shadow from the dead. Luckily, Ogien is there in time to cast it away. But Ged is scared. He's actually worried. And so, once again, this will be a recurring thing. We realize, like, he's not stupid. He's just prideful, and he lacks caution. He didn't know. He actually couldn't really decipher the ruins. There was an open page, and he just starts deciphering it. And we do learn a little later that this girl is in fact the daughter of an enchantress, so she was tempting him. She was taunting him and mocking him. But Ogien's just kind of like, yeah, but why did you give into it? Like, why would you act like that? Even though he knows about how balance and stuff works, he never once considers in this scene, what was the price that Ogien paid to send that away? How hard and difficult was that for him? Ged chooses to leave to learn. He wants to go to the school on Roke. With institutional learning on Roke, Ogien seems to be wary of it. He knows what Ged needs is this ethical edification. Two instances where Ged has risen to meet challenges, right? The first was the Kargas attack. And he met that challenge, and he overcame it. He was successful. He had to do this. His life depended on it. So did others' lives. But with the other challenge, when she also met with a show of power, was when he was being taunted. But he doesn't seem to realize that there was a difference between these two challenges. And the difference is in the moral decision-making. And so on his way to Roke, we see a theme arise of the direction of the wind as the direction of Ged's moral decision-making. And so on his way, the winds are blowing wild, it's turbulent. They almost don't make it. When he gets to the school, he presents the Archmage with a letter from Ogien, And the Archmage is kind of like, how was your trip? And Ged's like, yeah, I mean, it was, you know, a little turbulent, you know, the wind. The Archmage is like, oh, okay. He's like, so what was the name of the boat you came on? And Ged's like, the Shadow. And the Archmage is like, all right, like, what the whose decision was it to come? Mine. And so all these represent omens to the Archmage. And it's pretty clear. The wind is blowing, you know, chaotically because Ged doesn't have control over his moral decisions. And it's kind of leads to this negative emotion, which will be represented by the Shadow. And even in the letter to the Archmage, Guin says Ged will be a great wizard if the wind blow true. And so yeah, there's also, not only is there a deep connection between magic, growing up, responsibility, there is a deep connection between magic and moral choice. When he gets to the college, it's very interesting. It really is. I do wish some of these scenes would have been more drawn out. And I think that's one of the main problems I often had with this book, like, especially for more modern readers. Some of everything feels a little glossed over, but there's some really interesting just scenes, just really interesting ideas about the magic that could have been super fun if there was more depth to them. So like sometimes when the mages are talking, then the listener will, you know, get a sensory evocation about smells, like visuals. It's pretty neat. He gets a tour of the college from a student named Jasper, and this is his guide right at the beginning, and he thinks that Jasper is being rude and condescending because he calls him sir. And he probably is, because he is kind of a dick. We're introduced to another character named Vetch, who will become a lifelong friend of Ged. And they're all kind of in a group of friends, but Jasper and Ged are very much not on the greatest terms. And the college is really neat as they're exploring. Like, there are just paths that randomly end. There's this really cool scene where Jasper makes a flower like erupt into shimmering lights and whatnot. All the merchants and skilled workers around the college, they speak in riddles, and people will just randomly disappear. But most of this is glossed over. I do wish there would have been like more scenes with that stuff, some internal development with that. It just made it more fun. And then, yeah, almost immediately Jasper challenges Ged. You see this coming. Once he gets challenged, like, he can't prove that he knows anything, right? Because these students are older and they know more. Ged weirdly appeals to Ogien's teaching. He says sorcery is not meant for pleasure or praise, as if he subscribes to this philosophy, which he doesn't. And then Jasper says, so like, what do you do it for then? Money? Ged declares no, and he's frustrated. But that's it. He just says no, and then he has no answer, because he has no idea what he's talking about. All he was trying to do was gain the upper hand. He couldn't do it through a show of power, so he tried to do it through a show of wisdom. But he rejected wisdom when he rejected Ogien. So he just doesn't know what to say, because this is a lesson he's never learned. And with his time at the college, he is a fast learner, becomes sort of discouraged because he really wants to do actual magic. So, an example, he doesn't want to make a stone just appear through an illusion like a diamond. He wants to turn that stone into a diamond. He wants power. He wants to be able to make changes of his own making to the world. It's also instructed further at the college that changing the world through using names will change a thing. It'll upset the balance, the harmony, the equilibrium. And there's a point where the master hand says this: a rock is a good thing too, you know. He said, speaking less gravely. If the Isles of Earthsea were all made of diamond, we'd lead a hard life here. Enjoy illusions, lad, and let the rocks be rocks. He's trying to also instruct Ged that if you just reimpose your view of the world onto the world, it might not work out how you think. Why would you think that because you value diamonds for yourself because it gives you money, which is kind of what Jasper made fun of him for, should everything accord to that view? And now they don't outright say it. They say it in very wise ways. But Ged still, he's not picking this lesson up. But surely a wizard, one who has gone past these childish tricks of illusions to the true arts of summoning and change, was powerful enough to do what he pleased, and balance the world as seemed best to him, and drive back darkness with his own light. This is Ged's problem. right? He thinks, thrust your morals onto the world. Whatever comes, correct it with power. Remake the world according to your ethics. When he was young and he was attacked, he was nearly killed. How did he solve it? Well, through power. Interestingly, he actually did not use real magic. He used an illusion to trick the cards. He's developed arrogance. He's developed pride. He's developed this massive ego, this sense of himself. I'll thrust myself onto the world and just correct it as I go along. Damn everything else. Damn the balance. So there's a point where Ged goes with this group of other students, and they're finally going to learn how to name. They send him to a tower. He finishes faster than all the other students. So the master sends him back earlier than the other students. He's like, I'm going to let you return to the college. And he kind of gives him like a lesson. Remember, like, you know, this is stuff's important. And Ged, even though he finished faster than all the other students, he wanted more praise. He felt like the master somehow slighted him, but not by not recognizing, oh, look how great Ged is. Ged, you're just so much better than the other students. Look how you outpaced them all. And then there's some very small scenes where students kind of follow him around. They whisper things about how he's great. He's destined to become the next Archmage. Yeah, he doesn't see it because this isn't what he really wants. He is hell-bent on this very particular kind of power. He wants to be the greatest ever. And he wants to display that in a feat of humiliation to Jasper, right? And then he wants to be recognized. So at the university, he's reading through a lore book, this spell for summoning a shadow. And he is scared of it. He is worried, so he's not stupid. We get some insight into his thoughts with this. The more he learned, the less he would have to fear, until finally in his full power as wizard, he needed fear nothing in the world, nothing at all. Sort of somewhere deep inside, he's kind of terrified of this Kargish attack. His pride is an outgrowth of his fear and inadequacy. In his youth, magic gave him a place. It gave him an identity, right? And then the Karg's attack, he's terrified. Magic saves him. So he wants to become so powerful that he doesn't have to fear anything anymore. He wants to impose his morals on the world, and he'll just correct them as he goes. And once again, it was interesting. Like, there's this part where they're hanging out, and one dude's like sitting down levitating, and then they try to pull him down, and he like levitates above him. It's pretty cool. And then when Jasper shows up, like, Jasper makes these kind of challenging, rude comments, and Ged makes a remark and everybody laughs. So that's how Jasper felt slighted. And naturally, because they're wizards, like, that's what wizards do. Duel will ensue. Jasper immediately goes into saying, Ged, you're ruled by envy, and I think he's right, but Jasper is very much being, ruled by envy at this point too. So to show Jasper that, no, hey, the first time I didn't know anything, but now look how powerful I am. He turns into a hawk. And so this is very important because he doesn't use an illusion. He actually turns into a hawk. In this book, that's very dangerous. And all the other kids are like, whoa, hey, stop. Even Det tries to intervene because this is dangerous magic. Ged has a serious pride problem. He will meet and attempt to best any challenge in any way possible. And it's very interesting. Jasper says this. That's enough to prove that he sneaked a look in the book of shaping behind the master's back. What then? Go on, goat herd. I like this trap you're building for yourself. The more you try to prove yourself my equal, the more you show yourself for what you are. And when referring to Ged in chapter 4, the younger boys, used to seeing his black temper, Ged, break out at the least hint of slight or insult, watched him in wonder at his coolness now. So, first off, Ged, even in scenes that we may not be seeing, Ged has a black temper. He breaks out, even if it's slight, right? So it's not just Jasper. He's always like this. He's sort of known around the school for this. He's that guy. Why is he calm now? Well, this is his moment. This is his life's aspiration, this show of great power. And he wants to show everybody while humiliating someone else. And so naturally, Ged falls back on his go-to, like to summon the dead. But then there's this line. He knew that Jasper was far beneath him, had been sent perhaps only to bring him here tonight, no rival but a mere servant of Ged's destiny. Ged is calm because this is the moment that he's been waiting for. But he is rationalizing this as the world bending around his decisions. This is how he's interpreted Ogien's thinking. He doesn't think that he's just been overreacting to Jasper. No, he thinks he's been acting rationally, and the world was building slowly this final culmination. So it's his destiny. Whatever he believed, the world just reharmonized around that. That's how he's interpreting it. That's how much of a narcissist he's becoming. Ged creates a tear in the world, and what happens is he raises a dead spirit, and right behind that spirit is something without a name. It comes through into their world, it attacks Ged, rips his face apart, nearly kills him. His friend Vetch is like powerless to help. Everyone's powerless to help. The Archmage comes in and manages to close the tear, but the shadow escapes and remains in the world. As a consequence of this, the Archmage dies. So remember, Ogien didn't die, and Ged didn't learn his lesson because of that. And the shadow is immediately referred to as the shadow of his ignorance and his arrogance. He realized, like, oh wow, I messed up bad. Somebody died, I'm seriously injured, and now there's this dangerous thing loose in the world.